All right, this is Vinegar day 168. Back in rear delts. Super tired. Super late at night. But it's all good because back days, I just don't find them that difficult. High intensity back days, I'm in and out. It's not really that big a deal. It's quite easy for me to do them. So I'm exhausted, but I'll be fine. That's the beauty of high intensity training. But today I want to talk about a topic that Jeffrey Verity Schofield talked about. And normally what happens is I'll see a thumbnail and a video title and go, that sounds like a cool topic, I'll talk about that, and I won't even watch the person's video at all. I watched a little bit of his video. I kind of forgot everything he talked about now, but anyway, basically what I'm gonna do is put my 2 cents on the idea or talk about the topic from my perspective. And I think my perspective is probably a bit different than the average naturals because, yeah, I mean, you'll see in a bit, after I do the set, I'm gonna get into it and start kind of giving my 2 cents. And I think I'm going a little bit against the grain here. I might get a bit of flack from other naturals about my opinions on this one because I typically see, the topic, the topic is simply, who should you take advice from? Natties or steroid users, or combination of both, or should you totally not take advice from steroid users, or should you totally not take advice from naturals? And naturals typically are under the assumption that you shouldn't take any advice from roiders because it won't work, and I disagree pretty heavily. And I'm gonna get into that today. So I have some non-cookie cutter bullshit. It's going to be a more nuanced opinion than just straight up naturals have the most exercise science knowledge and steroid users don't. About to do a top set. What I will say is I really can't remember what Jeffrey said. He's a rare example of someone that I actually am willing to watch videos from. I actually like his advice. I get genuine insights from his videos, whereas everyone else is cookie cutter bullshit. And that's something I try to be myself. It's not the same generic shit because it's all been repeated anyway. So yeah, I can't really remember what he said. And if I seemingly massively disagree with him or seemingly agree with him massively, it's not because of his video. I can't even remember half the shit he said. My memory is that bad. But also what I want to say is my video is not going to be as eloquent. This is going to be a stream of consciousness. There's going to be golden tidbits here and there, but it's not going to be, that's why I like his videos. They're very clear and concise. It's like bullet point, step by step, delivery. And part of that is because he can do these videos preemptively. He can probably think, he might even map it out in written text and do it much more concise, whereas I'm just like blah, 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 and you'll get some golden tidbits. But anyway, if it seems like I'm copying shit he says, it would just be that I simply agree with him. But yeah, anyway, I thought it was a good topic, so that's what we're gonna get into after this set. Try not to scream right now, it's too late at night. That was a good set. So, where do I begin? First thing I want to say is, first thing I'll talk on is the holier than thou mentality that us naturals can take. This idea of, I'm better, I'm more moral because I decide to stay natural. And I mean, I understand some of the premise, but as I've gone on in years as a natural, I don't see that anymore. It's not that I personally don't think I'm any better than a steroid user from a moral perspective. It's just, it's so silly. It's like, what a man decides to do with his body is up to him. And one that isn't, don't get me wrong, I don't think steroids are a good idea necessarily, or for most people, it's not a good idea. And I think there's a lot of abuse. And I've made a video or videos on this in the previous time about basically being what would be considered anti-steroid. But that aside, I don't think I'm more moral. I don't think your decision to stay natural makes you more moral than a steroid user. Maybe at the very slightest degree due to the fact that steroids are illegal in your country, perhaps. I mean, but that one's silly. But what happens with that too is it extends to a intellectual superiority. It's a sense of, well, because I'm natural, I don't have this easy way out of steroids where I'm gonna blow up like Ronnie Coleman if I take steroids, and thus I need to learn vastly more about nutrition and exercise science than the steroid user. I have to overcompensate with my intellect. And it's like, man, I don't buy that one either. Just because someone's on steroids doesn't mean that that's gonna just get them huge by proxy. You have to have some decent understanding of training in order for steroids to give you that extra benefit. It's not super soldier serum. By all means, if you get on a heavy dosage of test and trend and deca and shit, yeah, you'll get pretty big with a lack of knowledge, but maybe really, because at the end of the day, the statistics of steroid users are insane. In Australia alone, 27 million people, 1 million of those a year on steroids. That's insane. That means that 1 in 27 people are on steroids in Australia. Everywhere else in the world, it could vary, but just that alone is pretty mind-boggling. And the amount of people at gyms who are on steroids that you would never guess in a million years they're on steroids is insane within itself. Because there's so many people at gyms who just look like shit. And I've been someone that works in gyms and knows people personally who are on steroids, who are open about it. And you go, well, you're on steroids? Like, what? Like, it's insane, because at the end of the day, it isn't this super soldier serum shit where if you don't have good nutrition and working out, you'll still get huge. No, that's only for genetic elites, and I'll get to that in a second. But for the average person on steroids, the idea that they don't know what they're doing and their advice is probably shit because steroids got them big, I don't buy that. You have to have a decent understanding of nutrition and training for steroids to get you a huge physique. Otherwise, you'll just be like any other dude in the gym on a cycle who has a shit physique, which is very, very common. Now, the only real caveat to that is genetic elites who are on steroids. Yes, if you have exceptional genetics and your sensitivity to training is through the fucking roof due to your genetics and you're on steroids, yeah, you could probably get away with some absolute nonsense. And I see this. I do see YouTube channels like this where it's just some absolute idiot with incredible genetics of steroid use that's giving advice that just doesn't make any fucking sense to anyone, let alone naturals or steroid users. But the same thing can happen for a natural. You can be a natural with exceptional genetics, and thus you don't really need to know how to train to be a genetic elite or a natural elite, and thus you go spouting natural advice that doesn't work for naturals because it only works for you because you're genetically gifted. So that is a case, but genetically gifted people are rare. That's hence why it's a gift. So the idea that a large majority of the steroid users or all these steroid users have terrible advice would be under the assumption they all have great genetics, which they don't. So yeah, if someone's genetically gifted, sure, but that could go steroids or natural either way anyway. So it's not even a steroid debate at that point. So that's still kind of my first point is steroids, yeah, they get you bigger for sure, but if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, then of course you're not going to get that big. And a lot of the times you won't even look like a gifted natural, let alone like a steroid user. So that'd be my first caveat, is just because someone's on steroids doesn't mean they're going to be absolutely massive and then thus, give terrible advice that won't work. It's not going to work if they're on steroids, whether they're natural or on steroids, because the training doesn't change as much as people think it does, and that's going to be a topic in a second. But that's just my first point, is steroids isn't going to give you this crazy physique that then allows you to have no knowledge of nutrition and working out. That's just not really how it works, unless you're a genetic freak. And no point repeating that, because that doesn't matter if you're natural or steroided. Anything will work if you're a genetic freak, but not everything will work just because you're on steroids. Hopefully you understand that first point. Fuck. Oh, shit. Oh. Oh, fuck. Now, just thinking that over, good set that, really good set. One of the points I very vaguely remember Jeffrey talking about was fluff and pump garbage that works for professional bodybuilders with elite genetics, by the way. So not necessarily the best pool of people to go by. Genetic elites are professional bodybuilders, or bodybuilders are genetic elites. But further into that is, if you're doing sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, lots of reps, big pump, lots of reps and volume, that works for genetic elite bodybuilders on massive amounts of steroids, who have increased sarcoplasmic hypertrophy due to this fact, and they're carved through the fucking wazoo, and they're on insulin. Yeah, that shit ain't gonna work for a natural. What works for them? But again, genetic elite on steroids doing something that can work if you're on steroids. That fluff and pump garbage will give you that big, fluffy, pumped up muscle that we see nowadays. This sarcoplasmic insulin-induced sort of hypertrophy versus myofibrillar hypertrophy. Because part of that is, yeah, these bodybuilders are on such a pharmaceutical combination that allows what is otherwise only about 15 to 20% maybe of what is normally hypertrophy, which is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. They are now able to utilize more like 25, 30, 35% of that shit because of the anabolic use and the insulin, the carbohydrate increase, the amount of calories they can consume over you as a natural especially is insane. So yes, and he's 100% right about that shit. The slow, controlled, blood volume shit is not going to work if you're natural. It just will not, unless you're a genetic elite And exactly, you're a natural genetic elite. You could then bespell shit that doesn't work for naturals, but naturals will go, well, this guy's natural, so he must know his shit. Because there's this idea that if someone's natural, they must know their shit because they have to know all this stuff. No, not necessarily. Or they could be fake natural. So that's another big thing, is this guy even natural? You know what I mean? What's his genetics like? Is he even training this way? So yeah, that fluff and pump garbage most definitely won't work. But a lot of steroid users in the fitness sphere aren't doing that. A lot of these guys, like Stan Efferding, huge inspiration to me. I love Stan Efferding. He's a guy who was probably natural for quite a long time, because also a lot of times these steroid users were probably natural for a long time. I mean, Mike Israetel, although I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he says, he's a good example of someone who was natural for a very long time. At some point, he's so invested into exercise science and fitness as a lifestyle that he was willing to sacrifice his health for steroids, which is kind of my next point, which is the fact is a lot of steroid users are actually vastly more involved in fitness than natties, because they're so obsessed with fitness, so obsessed with muscles, so obsessed with optimization that they're willing to go that extra level. They're willing to get on steroids to get that extra thing. So the kind of person who's so committed they're willing to get on steroids, you don't think this person's also really making sure that they're honing in nutrition, honing in programming? And then I guess the argument would be, okay, well, yeah, but then what works for them now is different anyway because they're on steroids. Well, perhaps a little bit if you're doing that fluff and pump garbage, but ultimately, essential nervous system is essential nervous system. So the perfect example of this would be HIIT, right? In high intensity training, it's actually the opposite of what you'd normally see. In volume, the idea is steroids allow you to do more volume, which is very well correct. But in high intensity training, the central nervous system is exactly the same, right? Your steroids don't improve your central nervous system's recovery ability. It improves its ability to lift more weights because you become more receptive. But if anything, it makes it harder to recover. Dorian Yates had to take 7 days in between muscle groups because he was so damn strong. And when you're incline bench pressing 450 pounds, the central nervous system's taking a way bigger hit than the version of you who's natural, who's doing 135 pounds. That guy could probably do high intensity every 3 to 4 days, right? And as you go up in strength as a natural, that recovery will then need to get longer and longer. And if you're on steroids, well, people on steroids get really fucking strong. So you need to recover even longer if you're doing any amount of high intensity. So yes, if someone's dispelling a lot of volume information, it can get a bit muddy because it does change with volume on steroids. But if you're really pushing your central nervous system to the max, it's actually the opposite. You have to train less as a steroid user versus the age-old, idea that steroids allow you to train. You can train more frequently, you can train more, you can get more volume. And it's like, yeah, you can get more volume, but at the end of the day, volume is not really the driver of hypertrophy. It's mechanical tension. So, I mean, another great reason to get into high intensity, but I don't want to make this video about that. But I've kind of gone, this is the total opposite of Jeffrey, where it's all short and concise. I'm going all off into different tangents, but hopefully it's, good information, yeah? But the original point here is, just because, the original point is, I think if someone's on steroids, they're probably even more committed than the average natural because they're willing to go that extra mile. And then also they're investing in this thing that costs a lot of money, is costing them their health. And it's like, if I'm going to get on steroids, I may as well make the most of it, right? Like if I was ever to jump on steroids, I would be trying to make the absolute most of it. And that would mean optimizing my training, optimizing my nutrition, making sure I knew my shit. Otherwise, it's not going to work because, again, steroids aren't super soldier serum. You can get on that shit, but if you're not doing it right, you won't look that good. And then no one's going to listen to you anyway. So no one's listening to the steroid user who's doing it wrong. They're only listening to the steroid users doing it right or the genetic freaks. So really, genetic freaks are fucking everything up for us, whether you're natural or on steroids. They're giving shit advice, or they're giving good advice, in which case, excellent. If you're a genetic freak and you know how to do things right, more power to you, man. But a lot of time, genetic freaks can get away with a hell of a lot less. All right, hitting that upper back musculature. Oh, it's better if I get my chest over, I feel. Oh, shit. Fuck. I think I drop set that. Oh, shit. Whew. So I'd say, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. There's idiots on both sides. Yeah, those nasty genetic freaks, or not really. I mean, partially, but there's idiots on both sides. There's natural. I've talked to so many fucking naturals where I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, these are dumb motherfuckers. They just don't know the basic training concepts, and they come up with. And this is a big thing with naturals, coming up with nonsense, coming up with just insane shit. Almost like trying to placebo their way through gains, where it's like they just come out with like weird exercise selections because they're like, well, I'm natural good, so I gotta find that fucking diamond in the rough, dude, that's gonna unlock those gains that puts me on like, dude, it's no, like what works for a steroid user works for a natural, only they're gonna get more gains because they're on steroids. Like, it's not like, all right, let's say a cable row, for example. I see this shit drives me up the fucking wall. Naturals will go, well, you know, cable row works for steroid users, but for me, I gotta do the Steve Reeves fucking like figure 8 upside down backwards row, where they make up like they try some like old school like late 1800s barbell movement that's just ridiculous and has a shitty resistance curve, or it's like where they're using like 5 different muscles at once, and it's like, dude, your muscles are the same. It's not like when you're on steroids, your fucking physiology changes and resistance curve changes and mind muscle connection changes. I mean, obviously it's a little bit, but what the human body is the same. The anatomy is the same. So you just have to do the same shit and expect less results because you're natural, right? So that's another thing, is just like coming up with ridiculous things to hope that you're gonna cheat your natural no, dude, if that was the case, steroid users would be doing the same fucking thing, because steroid users make more fucking money than naturals. They actually do this shit for a living, and thus they need to optimize things. Naturals don't have any fucking stake in the game. Now, obviously, bodybuilders who make money will do some ridiculous shit that won't work for a natural, but you have to understand my point here. It's not like you have to change all these fucking parameters when you're a natty. It's all the same shit. It's just you're gonna get less results. And in a lot of cases, you'll have to train a little bit more frequently because your tendons and ligaments aren't at risk, and your central nervous system is not getting crushed into the fucking dirt because you're not that strong. And you can train more frequently that way. It's very much the opposite in many cases. The volume, sure, you can probably do a bit more volume as a roided guy, and that's probably more so just because you have more glycogen in your muscles because they got bigger muscles, so you can train longer. But if you're doing any degree of intensity, it's very much the same. So that's the thing. Like, I see a lot of naturals that just come up with the dumbest shit, whereas bodybuilders typically on steroids typically stick to the fundamentals that work, and then sometimes they just start doing fluff and pump garbage, like, you know. But again, that's because that works when you're on steroids and you're looking to get that pump. You're trying to increase that sarcoplasmic size, right? So yeah, I'd say honestly, it's probably somewhere 50-50. It's probably, if you got every single natural and every single steroid user, and on per capita on average who knew more about exercise science is probably somewhere in the middle. There's probably plenty of retarded naturals and plenty of retarded steroid users, and then equally very intelligent, very thought out steroid users and very thought out naturals. Just from my experience, which is probably more than the average person, because I'm a personal trainer. I've talked to a lot of people in the gyms. I've worked in gyms. I've talked to all these people, and it's, you know, obviously anecdotal, but I've had a decent pool of people to speak to on this topic, or people in this topic group where it's naturals and steroid users. I mean, I might be way off. Maybe steroid users are fucking retarded and trend has rotted their brains, but yeah, I think it's not like one or the other. It's not black and white. It's a gray area. There's dummies and there's smarties in every aspect of reality. Now, in saying that, if you're natural, it probably does make more logical sense to then take advice from a good natural, and vice versa. If you're on steroids, it's probably good to take advice from a good steroid user. But the idea that you won't get one or the other that's silly. Dorian Yates has bestowed information to me that has massively changed my life in terms of training, or just in general, really. I mean, the guy's philosophy, just the guy in general, is a great inspiration to me. But this is a extremely steroid use, this is a guy that took a shit ton of steroids. He was on HGH, insulin, tren, deca, every fucking thing. And yet what he did works just as well for me, mainly because what his philosophy was myofibrillar hypertrophy and intensity. And really, intensity doesn't really change if you're natural or steroided, as I just said. The only difference is I can probably train a little bit more frequent because I'm nowhere as strong as Dorian Yates. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. You know, the biggest thing I say as to why a natural shouldn't watch steroid users and for their advice isn't that the advices won't be good. it's that it will make them more inclined to want to take steroids. If you're taking advice from dudes who are on steroids and half their vid is them talking whilst they're all jacked up, or like maybe they're posting, maybe the video, like they're talking over a video where they're all jacked, or whatever, like, you know, you see these huge jacked up dudes on a daily basis, you're gonna start developing body dysmorphia. Whereas if you watch a natural, you'll be more inspired. You'll be like, this guy, I can achieve that, right? So taking an influence, take the influence in that isn't gonna make you feel fucked up and insecure because you're not fucking jacked like the Trend Twins or Sam Sulek or Mike Israel or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? So that'd be my biggest thing, is just simply don't watch these motherfuckers because it's just gonna make you feel like shit. It's not that their advice is gonna be any shitty. I mean, Stan Efferding has incredible advice. Dorian Yates, great advice. But when I watch fucking Dorian Yates, I mean, to be fair, I'm pretty secure with my physique at this point. This is more maybe for advice for younger guys who haven't quite built up the physique yet, and in which case you're going to be inspired by me, Alex Leonidas, Jeffrey Verity Schofield, whoever, you know, one of these good naturals with good advice. You know, you're going to be demoralized by a Sam Sulek's training advice is pretty garbage, but you're going to be demoralized by a Stan Efferding when you look at him fucking squatting 800 pounds, freakishly roided out to his max. I mean, good advice, but it's just not good for your brain. So that'd be my biggest thing. You know, there are some things though where if you are listening to roiders, they might forget the differences. Like a good roider, let's say for example, they're talking about body fat percentage. A good steroid user who gives advice would go, in between 6 to 12% body fat is the ideal for a steroid user. And then when it comes to a natural, they would say ideal is 10 to 20, because for a natural, under 10% body fat, your fucking testosterone you're just depleting and you start getting hypergonadism. On steroids, that's not an issue because it's coming externally, but naturally, that's a fucking awful idea to go under 10% body fat, maybe even 12, really. So that would, some things like that, that's not necessarily training advice, so that's like body composition advice. In which case, if you're listening to a roider, you might have some pretty whack ideas on body composition, which then it comes back into the body dysmorphic shit. You're taking advice from someone and you could be expecting certain gains that they're getting and just not remotely get them and go, fuck, well, better go on steroids. You know what I mean? Oh shit. Oh shit, my fucking hair. Mechanical drop set. One more quick drop set. What the fuck? What the fuck? Oh, there we go. Oh shit. All right, that's it for today. See you guys for more piece of vinegar. Gonna do some posing now.